The native girl showed up in tears. The cowboy said, "You don't have to pretend with me." The sun had barely risen over the small town, painting the horizon with soft shades of pink and orange. The streets were quiet except for the occasional sound of a rooster crowing or a distant dog barking. In the heart of the town, the rodeo grounds were slowly coming to life. Wooden fences creaked as the early workers checked the pens, and the smell of hay mixed with the earthy scent of the nearby fields. It was a place where people had grown up together, where families spent weekends cheering at the rodeo, and where everyone knew each other's name. On this morning, a young native girl appeared at the edge of the grounds. She looked small and fragile against the wide-open spaces, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders like a curtain she could hide behind. Her eyes, usually bright with curiosity, were red and swollen from crying. She clutched her bag tightly, as if holding on to it could somehow protect her from the worries she carried inside. Her footsteps were hesitant, and each one seemed heavier than the last, as though the ground itself could sense her sadness. The girl had grown up in the town, but had always felt a little out of place. Life for her had not been easy. She'd carried the weight of her family's struggles, the expectations from her community, and the quiet pain of feeling misunderstood. She had learned to put on a brave face, to smile when others looked at her, even when her heart felt like it was breaking. But today she couldn't hide it. The tears had come too fast, too deep, and she didn't have the energy to pretend anymore. As she wandered through the pens, she tried to blend in, hoping no one would notice her. But the cowboy, who was preparing for the day's events, spotted her almost immediately. He was a tall man with weathered skin, the kind that spoke of years spent under the sun. His hands were calloused from work, and his eyes held a softness that didn't match his rugged appearance. He was known in the town for being honest, kind, and quietly brave. Unlike many others, he didn't rush to judgment, didn't pretend to have all the answers, and didn't make people feel small for their problems. He watched the girl from a distance for a moment, noticing the way her shoulders slumped and the way her hands trembled as she held her bag. There was something about her that tugged at his heart. Maybe it was her vulnerability, or maybe it was the way she seemed lost in a world that hadn't been very kind to her. Either way, he knew he couldn't just walk past her. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward her. His steps were slow and steady, giving her the chance to notice him without feeling cornered. When he finally reached her, he didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, giving her space, letting her know he wasn't there to push her or pry. The silence between them felt comforting, like a small shield against the rest of the world. The girl tried to look away, hoping he wouldn't talk to her. She wasn't used to strangers showing concern, especially not in a town where people often kept their problems to themselves. But there was something different about this man. She could see it in his eyes. There was no judgment, no expectation, only a quiet understanding that sometimes life could be too heavy for a person to carry alone. Finally he spoke, his voice calm and gentle. "You don't have to pretend with me!" The words hit her like a soft but steady wave. It was such a simple sentence, yet it carried more meaning than she had heard in a long time. No one had ever said that to her before. People had told her to stay strong or be brave, but they rarely acknowledged the pain that was already there. They rarely offered the simple permission to be herself, to let the tears fall without shame. For a moment she didn't respond. She just looked at him, her chest rising and falling quickly as if trying to catch her breath. The tears in her eyes threatened to spill over again, but she tried to hold them back. She had spent so long hiding her emotions that letting them show felt both terrifying and relieving at the same time. The cowboy didn't push. He didn't ask her to explain, didn't ask her why she was crying or what had happened. He simply stood there, a quiet presence that seemed to say, "It's okay. You are not alone." That simple acceptance made her heart ache in a way that was both painful and comforting. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she allowed herself to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it was the first step toward releasing the weight she had been carrying. It's just been so hard," she said, her words trembling. "I don't know if I can handle everything anymore." The cowboy nodded, his expression gentle and patient. "I understand," he said. "You don't have to handle it all at once. You don't have to do it alone." His words, though simple, felt like a lifeline. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't have to pretend. She could let herself be vulnerable without fear of judgment. The world around her, the bustling rodeo, the workers moving hay, the smell of horses in the pens, seemed to fade away. All that mattered was this moment, this rare connection with someone who genuinely cared. As they stood together, the girl began to feel a flicker of hope. She wasn't sure what would come next or how she would face the challenges in her life, but she felt a little lighter knowing that someone saw her, really saw her. The cowboy's presence reminded her that kindness could exist even in unexpected places, that people could surprise you with compassion when you least expected it. Time passed quietly. The sun climbed higher in the sky, casting warm light across the rodeo grounds. The sounds of the town gradually grew louder, the chatter of workers, the neighing of horses, the distant roar of a tractor, but the girl barely noticed. She was lost in the small but powerful feeling of being understood, of being allowed to feel her emotions without hiding them. The cowboy finally smiled, a small reassuring curve of his lips. "Whenever you're ready, you can talk to me," he said. "Or you can just sit here. It's your choice. I'll be around." That simple offer, free of pressure or expectation, meant more than she could put into words. She nodded, a small gesture, but it carried a weight of gratitude. She wasn't alone, and for now, that was enough. As she sat down on the edge of a wooden fence, she let herself breathe deeply for the first time that morning. The tears that had threatened to overwhelm her slowly faded into quiet sniffles, and she felt a tiny spark of courage grow inside her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, or how her life would change, but she knew that in this moment she had found someone she could trust. The cowboy returned to his work, checking on the horses and preparing for the day's events, but he kept an eye on her from time to time. There was no rush, no urgency, just the steady rhythm of a man who understood that trust and care could not be forced. They had to grow naturally, and for the first time in a long while the girl felt a sense of calm. She was not alone, and that realization made her heart a little lighter. Even as the rodeo came alive with the sounds of laughter, the pounding of hooves, and the calls of vendors, the girl remained in her quiet bubble of safety. She had arrived in tears, carrying her heavy heart with her, but she left the first part of her story with a spark of hope. The cowboy's words echoed in her mind. "You don't have to pretend." It was a sentence she would carry with her, a gentle reminder that even in a world that often seemed harsh and unyielding, there were people who could see your pain and still offer kindness. And in that moment, the small town, the dusty rodeo grounds, and the rising sun all seemed to conspire to tell her that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The morning slowly unfolded into the late hours of the day, and the rodeo grounds grew busier with each passing moment. Horses neighed loudly as cowboys moved between pens, checking saddles and bridles. The smell of fresh hay mixed with dust rising from the ground under the warm sun. Children ran around, laughing and chasing each other, while vendors set up their stalls, filling the air with the sweet aroma of baked goods and the faint sound of music from a small radio. Life was moving on as usual, but the young native girl still sat quietly on the edge of the wooden fence, hugging her knees to her chest. She hadn't moved much since the cowboy's words reached her. "You don't have to pretend with me." That simple sentence had opened something inside her, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. She had spent years pretending to be strong, always wearing a brave face for her family and her community, but now she realized how exhausting it had been. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to feel the sadness she had tried so hard to hide. Her tears came again, quiet and slow this time, and she didn't try to stop them. The cowboy noticed immediately. He had been tending to the horses nearby, but every so often his eyes wandered toward her. He didn't rush over or demand that she talk. He knew that forcing someone to open up too soon could push them away. Instead, he continued with his work, letting her feel the security of his presence without words. After a while, the girl wiped her cheeks and looked around, unsure of how to explain herself. She had always been careful about showing her emotions in public. People in the town were kind, but they rarely understood the struggles she faced, the conflicts at home, or the loneliness she felt. She had learned to hide her feelings behind smiles, nods, and polite words. Today, however, the weight inside her had become too heavy to carry alone. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I just feel so lost sometimes, like I don't belong anywhere. The cowboy listened carefully, nodding as if he understood every word without needing an explanation. It's okay to feel that way, he said gently. You're allowed to feel lost. You're allowed to be scared. Everyone feels that sometimes. The girl looked at him, surprised at how easy it was to speak to him. There was no judgment in his eyes, no hint of impatience, just quiet understanding. For years, she had wished someone would listen without interrupting, without offering advice unless she asked for it. That was exactly what this man was doing. Simply listening. Simply being there. Encouraged, she shared a little more, her words spilling out in fragments. At home, it's hard. Everyone has expectations, and I try to meet them, but I feel like I'm always failing. And at school, I just feel invisible sometimes. People look at me but don't really see me. The cowboy nodded again, his expression kind but serious. I hear you. And I see you. That matters more than you think. Sometimes being seen is the first step to finding your way. Her lips trembled as she tried to smile, a small, hesitant curve of her mouth. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. She had spent so much time pretending that she didn't need anyone, that she could handle everything alone, that the idea of someone genuinely understanding her felt almost unreal. The cowboy walked over slowly, bringing a bucket of water and setting it down near her. Here, he said simply. You might be thirsty after all that sitting. And it's okay if you don't talk anymore. You can just rest. The girl took a sip, feeling the cool water wash down her throat. She appreciated the gesture, not just because it helped her physically, but because it was a reminder that someone cared enough to notice her needs without asking anything in return. She realized then that kindness could be quiet, gentle, and still powerful. As the day went on, the girl began to feel a small sense of relief. The rodeo grounds were lively and full of distractions, but she didn't feel pressured to act happy or confident. The cowboy stayed nearby, occasionally checking on her, occasionally giving a soft word of encouragement, but mostly just letting her breathe and be herself. That was something she had never experienced before, someone letting her exist without expectations. Slowly, she began to open up more about her life. She talked about her family, her parents' constant struggles, her siblings' teasing, the pressure she felt to always be perfect. She spoke of her school, the challenges of fitting in, and the loneliness of feeling misunderstood. Each word was a release, a way to let go of the heavy weight she had been carrying for so long. The cowboy didn't interrupt. He didn't try to solve her problems or offer advice unless she asked. Instead, he listened with patience, nodding and responding with short, gentle sentences that showed he cared. That sounds really hard, he said at one point. I can see why it feels overwhelming. But you're doing your best, and that's enough. His words were simple, yet they carried more weight than any lecture or criticism she had ever received. She realized that she didn't have to be perfect to be worthy of care or understanding. She didn't have to hide her tears or pretend she was strong all the time. For the first time in years, she felt a tiny spark of hope. The girl noticed small details about the cowboy that made her feel more comfortable. The way he moved gently with the horses, the way he smiled softly at the animals, the way he spoke to others with respect and honesty. He didn't act tough or try to impress anyone. He simply was himself, and that authenticity made her feel safe. Time seemed to slow as they sat together, sharing quiet moments and small conversations. The girl began to laugh softly at a story the cowboy told about a horse that refused to follow directions. It was a small, almost hesitant laugh, but it felt freeing. She hadn't realized how much she had missed laughing without pretending, without holding back. By the afternoon, the sun had climbed high, and the heat made the rodeo grounds shimmer with golden light. People moved about busily, but the girl felt a sense of calm she hadn't known in a long time. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't hiding, and she wasn't pretending. She was allowed to simply be herself, and it felt like a small miracle. The cowboy noticed the change in her. He didn't comment directly, but he gave her a small nod of acknowledgement, as if to say, "I see you. You're doing okay." That silent support mattered more than any words could. As the day drew on, the girl began to think about the future with a new perspective. She realized that while her struggles weren't over, she didn't have to face them alone. She had someone who would listen, someone who wouldn't judge, someone who believed in her simply because she existed. It was a powerful realization, one that made her feel lighter and more confident than she had in months. Eventually, she stood up, brushing off the dust from her jeans and taking a deep breath. She felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief, but most of all, she felt a sense of possibility. For the first time in a long while, she believed that things could get better, that her life could be more than just a series of challenges and struggles. The cowboy tipped his hat slightly and smiled at her. "Take your time," he said. "You're doing just fine. And remember, you don't have to pretend with me, or anyone who truly cares." The girl nodded, a small, genuine smile spreading across her face. It wasn't perfect and it didn't erase the difficulties she faced, but it was a start. And sometimes a start was all that mattered. As she walked away from the fence to help with small chores around the rodeo, she felt a quiet strength growing inside her. She had faced her emotions, allowed herself to be vulnerable, and found someone who saw her for who she truly was. It was a moment she would carry with her, a reminder that even in the hardest times, connection and understanding could bring light into the darkest corners of life. That day, the young girl learned that trust could be built slowly, that kindness could heal, and that pretending to be okay wasn't necessary when someone genuinely cared. And as the cowboy continued his work, he kept a watchful eye on her, not to intrude, but to ensure she always knew that support and understanding were never far away. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, casting long shadows across the grounds, the girl felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The rodeo would continue, people would come and go, and life would still have its challenges, but she had discovered something invaluable: the power of being seen, heard, and accepted without pretense. And in that simple, quiet moment, she understood that sometimes, just sometimes, the smallest gestures, kind words, a gentle presence, or even a single sentence like, "You don't have to pretend with me," could change a life forever. The days that followed at the rodeo grounds slowly turned into a small, comforting routine. The young native girl no longer sat on the edge of the fence alone. Instead, she began to spend more time near the cowboy, observing how he worked with the horses and helping with small chores. She had never thought that someone could be so patient and kind without expecting anything in return. Each morning, she would arrive quietly, sometimes carrying a small bucket of water or holding extra tools, careful not to disturb the rhythm of the grounds, but always finding him nearby, ready with a gentle word or a small gesture of encouragement. At first, the girl still felt nervous around him. She was used to hiding parts of herself, especially her vulnerabilities. Speaking up had always been hard. But something about the cowboy's calm presence made it feel safer to open up. He never pushed her to talk. He simply allowed her to be herself. Sometimes they didn't speak at all. She would just watch him work with the horses, noticing the care in his hands, the quiet way he moved, and the patience he had for animals who could be stubborn or frightened. One afternoon, after feeding a particularly spirited horse, the cowboy leaned against the fence and looked at her. "You know," he said, "horses teach you a lot about life. They don't respond to force. They respond to patience, understanding, and trust." "People are a lot like that, too." The girl tilted her head, thinking about his words. She realized that he was right. She had spent so much time trying to force herself to fit into other people's expectations, pretending to be someone she wasn't, that she had forgotten the importance of patience and trust. She had tried to solve her problems alone, and that had only made her feel heavier and lonelier. Encouraged by his words, she began to share a little more about herself. She spoke of the small joys she had in life, the moments of laughter with her siblings, the beauty of the fields around the town, and the songs her grandmother used to sing. Each memory brought a small smile to her face, and the cowboy listened carefully, never interrupting or dismissing her feelings. Sometimes he would nod. Sometimes he would offer a quiet laugh at a funny moment she remembered. And sometimes he would simply stay silent, letting her words linger in the air like soft music. As the days passed, the girl noticed something changing inside her. She was beginning to feel lighter, freer. The weight of pretending and hiding was slowly lifting. She found herself laughing more easily, moving with less hesitation, and even speaking up when she had something to say. The cowboy's simple kindness had given her the courage to start trusting herself and the world around her. One morning, as the sun rose and the mist still clung to the grass, the girl arrived a little earlier than usual. The cowboy was already there, checking the pens and brushing the horse with careful attention. She hesitated for a moment, unsure if she should interrupt his work, but he noticed her immediately and smiled. "Good morning," he said softly. "You're here early today." She nodded, feeling a warmth spread in her chest. "I wanted to help," she said quietly, holding the brush in her hands. Together they worked in companionable silence. The girl brushed the horse gently, following the cowboy's instructions and learning the little things that made the animals respond better. He showed her how to move calmly, how to speak softly, and how to notice even the smallest signs of discomfort or fear. With each passing hour, she felt a growing sense of competence and confidence. She was learning something new, and she was doing it well. After a while, she paused, wiping her hands on her jeans, and looked at the cowboy. "Thank you," she said simply, "for everything, for listening, for not judging me, and for letting me just be me." The cowboy smiled, tipping his hat slightly. "You don't need to thank me. You're already doing the hard part. You're trusting, you're learning, and you're being yourself. That's what matters." The girl felt a lump in her throat. No one had ever said such things to her before. Her life had often been full of criticism, pressure, and expectations. People had told her she needed to be stronger, braver, smarter. But rarely had anyone acknowledged her efforts or her struggles in a way that felt genuine. The cowboy's words were different. They were honest, gentle, and kind. They made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. As the afternoon sun warmed the grounds, they took a break under the shade of an old oak tree. The girl sat quietly, letting the gentle breeze brush against her face. The cowboy handed her a small bottle of water and sat beside her, giving her the space to rest without intrusion. They didn't speak much, but the quiet felt comforting. Sometimes the most meaningful moments weren't filled with words. They were simply shared presence, understanding, and care. Over the next few days, their connection grew stronger. The girl began to trust the cowboy not only with her words, but with her actions. She helped him organize the equipment, led horses to the pens, and even offered advice when she noticed something that could be improved. Her confidence was building steadily, and she felt a quiet pride in being useful and capable. The cowboy, in turn, encouraged her gently, praising her efforts without exaggeration, showing her that real encouragement was rooted in honesty. One afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky and the shadows grew longer, the girl opened up about something she had never shared with anyone before.
"Sometimes," she said slowly, "I feel like I'm invisible."
Like no matter what I do, no one notices me. And when they do, they only see what they want to see, not who I really am. The cowboy listened carefully, his expression calm and patient. "I understand," he said. "It can be really lonely to feel invisible, to feel like people only see what they expect. But I see you. And I mean that. Not just your actions or your words, but you. Who you are inside." Tears welled up in the girl's eyes again, but this time they weren't just from sadness, they were from relief. Relief that someone truly understood her, that someone cared without conditions, and that she no longer had to carry the burden of pretending alone. They sat together in silence for a while, watching the sun cast golden light across the dusty grounds. The girl felt a strange but welcome calm settle over her. She realized that she was beginning to understand something important. Trust and connection didn't happen instantly. They grew slowly, through small gestures, shared moments, and quiet understanding. And she was experiencing that for the first time in her life. Over the following weeks, the girl's transformation became more evident. She laughed more freely, spoke with more confidence, and even began to engage with others around the rodeo grounds. Her interactions were still cautious at times, but she no longer felt invisible or powerless. The cowboy had shown her that being herself was enough, and that encouragement and understanding could help her grow stronger than any criticism ever could. One day, as they finished brushing a particularly stubborn horse together, the cowboy looked at her with a small smile. "You've come a long way," he said. "Not just with the horses, but with yourself. You're learning to trust, to speak, and to believe in who you are. That's not easy, and I'm proud of you." The girl felt warmth spread through her chest, and she smiled back, genuinely this time.
Thank you,
she said softly. "For seeing me, really seeing me, and not making me feel broken." "You're not broken," he replied. "You're human. And humans grow through understanding, trust, and care. You're already growing, and you'll keep growing every day." That evening, as the sun set and the town slowly grew quiet again, the girl walked home with a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. The weight she had carried for years wasn't gone entirely, but it was lighter, manageable, and shared in a way that made it easier to bear. She knew that challenges would still come, but she also knew that she had someone to trust, someone who believed in her, and most importantly, someone who reminded her that she didn't have to pretend to be perfect. The cowboy watched her leave, a quiet smile on his face. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth for her, but he also knew that she was learning an important lesson. Strength wasn't about hiding pain or pretending to be someone else. True strength was about trusting, opening up, and allowing kindness to guide you through the toughest times. And for the first time in her life, the girl believed that she could face the world not alone, but with someone who saw her, understood her, and accepted her completely. That belief, fragile but growing, was the most powerful change of all. The following weeks brought many challenges for the young native girl. Life outside the rodeo grounds was not easy, and the burdens she carried from home and school often returned to weigh heavily on her. There were days when the laughter and support she found at the rodeo felt like a distant memory, and the familiar anxiety and loneliness crept back in. But she no longer faced these struggles alone. She had the cowboy, whose presence gave her strength and courage, even when she doubted herself. One afternoon, the girl arrived at the rodeo grounds with a heavy heart. She had argued with her mother that morning, words exchanged in frustration and pain, leaving her feeling guilty and misunderstood. Her father had been distant, buried in his work, and her siblings seemed indifferent to the turmoil in her home. She had tried to hold herself together, but the weight of family expectations and her own self-doubt had become almost unbearable. The cowboy noticed her immediately. He could tell by the way she walked, her shoulders slumped and her eyes downcast, that something was wrong. Without asking intrusive questions, he walked over and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Rough morning?" he asked quietly. The girl nodded, swallowing hard to keep back tears. It's been really hard," she admitted. "I feel like no matter what I do, I can't make anyone happy. I try, but I always fail." The cowboy guided her to a quiet spot under the shade of a large oak tree, away from the busy sounds of the rodeo. "You're not failing," he said softly. "You're doing your best, and that matters. People sometimes forget that trying is enough." She shook her head, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. But it doesn't feel like enough. I feel so small, like I'm invisible, and like I don't belong anywhere." The cowboy sat down beside her, letting her take the lead in opening up. "I hear you," he said. "It's okay to feel that way. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Feeling small doesn't mean you are worthless. It means you're alive and caring." For a long time, the girl remained silent, thinking about his words. They weren't the kind of phrases people usually said to her. Most people told her to get over it or stop crying. The cowboy's words were different. They acknowledged her feelings, gave them space, and offered understanding without judgment. Slowly, she began to tell him more, revealing the deep insecurities that had haunted her for years. I'm scared about school," she admitted. I feel like I'm not smart enough, like I'll never make it. And at home, I feel like I'm always disappointing everyone. I don't know how to fix it." The cowboy nodded, listening carefully. "You don't have to fix everything at once," he said. "Life isn't about being perfect, it's about taking one step at a time. You've already started by being here, sharing your feelings. That's huge." His words gave her a small but important sense of hope. She had spent years trying to solve her problems alone, thinking she had to be perfect to be loved or accepted. The idea that she could take small steps, that she didn't have to solve everything at once, was a revelation. Over the next few days, the cowboy helped her develop practical ways to face her challenges. At the rodeo, he showed her how to manage the horses confidently, reminding her that patience and attention to detail could be applied to life outside as well. He encouraged her to organize her schoolwork in small, manageable parts and to celebrate the little victories rather than focusing only on failures. Most importantly, he taught her that asking for help was not a weakness. It was a sign of strength. One afternoon, while they were brushing down the horses together, the girl opened up about her fear of speaking to her family about her struggles. "I don't know how to tell them," she said, her voice trembling. "I'm scared they'll be disappointed, or worse, that they won't understand." The cowboy listened quietly, then said, "You don't have to do it all at once. You can start small. Share a little. Be honest, but take your time. They might surprise you, and even if they don't, you'll still be taking control of your story." The girl considered his words. They made sense. She had been avoiding her problems, pretending everything was fine, and it hadn't helped. Maybe being honest, even just a little, could make a difference. Maybe she could stop hiding from the people who mattered most. Over the next week, she began practicing what the cowboy had taught her. She wrote small notes to herself about her feelings, prepared her thoughts before speaking, and even tried short conversations with her siblings. At first it was awkward and frightening, but she noticed that even small steps made her feel braver. She wasn't perfect, and she still struggled, but she was moving forward. One evening, after a long day at the rodeo, the girl confided in the cowboy about a particularly difficult moment with her mother.
"I tried to tell her how I feel, but she
didn't really listen. I felt invisible again." The cowboy nodded, understanding the frustration in her voice. "It's odd when people don't see us the way we need them to," he said. "But that doesn't mean your feelings aren't valid. You're learning to stand up for yourself, and that's important. Keep going. You're stronger than you think." The girl felt a spark of determination. The cowboy's words reminded her that strength wasn't about never feeling pain or never being misunderstood. It was about continuing to try, even when life was hard. She realized that she could face her struggles with courage and that she didn't have to carry the weight alone. As the days passed, she began to notice changes in herself. She spoke more confidently at school, started participating in activities she had once avoided, and even found moments of joy in simple things, helping a friend, laughing with her siblings, or feeling the warmth of the sun on her face while working with the horses. Each small step built her confidence, and she began to see herself not as a helpless girl, but as someone capable of growth and resilience. The cowboy continued to support her quietly, offering guidance when needed and giving her space when she needed it. He reminded her that healing and growth were not linear. They came with ups and downs, victories and setbacks, and he showed her, through example, that kindness and patience could make a lasting difference in someone's life. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the dusty rodeo grounds, the girl sat on the fence, reflecting on how far she had come. She thought about the mornings when she had arrived in tears, feeling lost and invisible. Now, she could smile genuinely, laugh without fear, and even stand tall when faced with challenges. She realized that the cowboy's simple words, "You don't have to pretend with me," had been the first step in a journey that was teaching her to face life with courage and honesty. She also realized something else. Her struggles were still there. Her family conflicts, school pressures, and moments of self-doubt had not disappeared. But she had learned something far more valuable. She had learned to face them, to take small steps toward change, and to trust herself along the way. She understood that growth wasn't about avoiding pain, but about learning to navigate it with patience, courage, and the support of those who truly cared. By the end of Part 4, the girl had begun confronting her challenges with newfound strength. She was no longer hiding behind pretenses or pretending to be someone she wasn't. She was learning to trust, to open up, and to embrace her true self. The cowboy had given her the tools to face life's difficulties, but she had taken the steps herself. And in that realization, she felt a deep sense of pride and hope. That evening, as the rodeo grounds quieted down and the sky turned shades of pink and purple, the girl and the cowboy stood together looking at the horizon. The girl felt a calm confidence she had never known before. She knew life would still be hard, but she also knew that she was no longer alone. She had someone who believed in her, who understood her, and who reminded her every day that she didn't have to pretend to be perfect. And in that quiet moment, the girl felt a profound sense of possibility. She had faced her struggles, begun to trust herself, and started building a life guided by courage, honesty, and hope. The road ahead would not be easy, but she was ready to walk it, one step at a time, with the cowboy's quiet support always nearby. The days at the rodeo grounds had become familiar and comforting for the young native girl. She arrived each morning with a sense of purpose, ready to help with chores, care for the horses, or simply spend time with the cowboy who had become her quiet guide and friend. Life outside the grounds still had its difficulties, but she had learned that she no longer had to face them alone. Every day brought small victories, smiles, moments of laughter, and the quiet knowledge that she was being seen and understood. One morning, as she arrived early, she noticed the cowboy waiting by the fence. His hat shaded his eyes from the rising sun, and his expression carried the calm certainty that had always comforted her. "Good morning," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "Ready for today?" She smiled, a genuine, full smile that reached her eyes. "Yes," she replied. "I think I'm ready." That day they worked together as they often did, brushing the horses, preparing the pens, and checking the saddles. But today felt different. The girl felt lighter, more confident. Her movements were more assured, her laughter came more easily, and she found herself speaking freely about her thoughts and feelings. She realized that she no longer feared being misunderstood or judged. She had discovered something that was far more powerful than approval from others. She had discovered trust, both in herself and in those who genuinely cared about her. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she took a moment to pause and look around. The rodeo grounds, which had once seemed so overwhelming, now felt familiar and comforting. The horses moved calmly, the dust swirled gently in the sunlight, and the sounds of people working around her no longer felt chaotic. Instead, they blended into a rhythm that matched her own growing sense of inner peace. The cowboy noticed her thoughtful expression and walked over. "What's on your mind?" he asked gently. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice soft but steady. "I'm thinking about everything that's happened, and how much I've changed. I don't feel as scared or alone anymore." "I feel stronger," the cowboy smiled. "That's good to hear. You've worked hard, and you've taken the steps yourself. Strength isn't given, it's built, and you've been building it every day." She nodded, feeling a swell of pride. It wasn't just the cowboy's support that had helped her. It was her own courage, her willingness to face her fears, and her determination to keep moving forward even when life was difficult. She had begun to see herself in a new light, not as a fragile, invisible girl, but as someone capable of growth, resilience, and hope. That afternoon, a small challenge arose. A young colt had gotten loose, and the horses in the pens began to stir nervously. The girl felt a moment of panic. Her heart raced as she considered the danger. But then she remembered the lessons she had learned. Patience, observation, calmness, and trust. Taking a deep breath, she approached the colt slowly, speaking softly and moving carefully. The cowboy stood nearby, ready to help if needed, but he let her take the lead. Step by step, she guided the colt back into the pen. The animal hesitated and shuffled its hooves, but she stayed calm, repeating gentle words and careful gestures. After a few tense moments, the colt finally settled, and the girl breathed a sigh of relief. She felt a surge of confidence and pride.
Not only had she handled the situation safely, but she had also realized that she was capable of facing challenges with courage and calm determination. The cowboy clapped his hands lightly, a proud smile on his face.
"Well done," he said. "You stayed calm, you stayed focused, and you handled it perfectly. That's what strength looks like." The girl felt a warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't about praise, though his words felt nice. It was about the recognition that she had grown, that she had faced fear and uncertainty and come out stronger. She realized that true strength wasn't about never feeling scared. It was about facing fear with courage, trusting herself, and moving forward despite uncertainty. Over the next few weeks, the girl continued to grow in confidence and self-assurance. She began to help other children at the rodeo, showing them how to care for the horses, guiding them through small tasks, and sharing gentle advice. She discovered the joy of helping others and saw that her own struggles had given her empathy and understanding that made her a source of support for those around her. She felt a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. A connection not just with the cowboy, but with the community she had once felt distant from. One evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky and the sky turned shades of pink and gold, the girl sat with the cowboy on a wooden fence, looking out at the open fields beyond the rodeo. The gentle breeze carried the scent of hay and the faint sound of horses settling for the night. She felt a quiet contentment, a sense of peace that came from knowing she was no longer pretending, no longer hiding, and no longer facing life alone. "I've learned so much," she said softly, breaking the silence. "Not just about horses, or chores, or even school, but about myself. I've learned that it's okay to ask for help, that I don't have to pretend, and that I can face challenges without being afraid." The cowboy nodded, his eyes warm and kind. "Exactly," he said. "Life will always have challenges, but you've learned something far more important. You've learned to trust yourself, to take steps forward, and to accept help when it's offered. That's the real strength." The girl smiled, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. She thought about the mornings when she had arrived at the rodeo in tears, feeling small and invisible. She thought about the moments of fear and doubt, the arguments at home, the pressure at school, and the loneliness that had once felt unbearable. And now she realized how far she had come. She had found courage, resilience, and connection. She had discovered the power of kindness, patience, and trust. As they sat together, the cowboy spoke again. "Remember, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to carry everything alone. Life isn't about pretending, it's about being yourself, learning from your struggles, and moving forward. You've done all of that, and you'll keep doing it, one day at a time." The girl nodded, feeling a sense of hope and determination settle in her heart. She knew that life would still have difficulties, but she also knew that she now had the tools to face them. She had learned that her emotions were valid, that her feelings mattered, and that she could grow stronger without hiding her true self. Days turned into weeks, and the girl continued to thrive. She spoke with her family more openly, shared her thoughts and feelings honestly, and found that even small gestures of communication could bridge gaps that had once seemed impossible to cross. At school, she began to participate more confidently, making friends and building connections that had once felt out of reach. The girl discovered that by trusting herself and opening her heart to others, she could create a life filled with hope, connection, and resilience. One afternoon, as the girl and the cowboy walked through the open fields beyond the rodeo grounds, she felt a profound sense of peace. The sun cast long shadows across the grass, the breeze whispered through the trees, and the world seemed calm and gentle. She looked at the cowboy and smiled. "Thank you," she said softly.
"For everything, for helping me see who I really am, and for reminding me that I don't have to pretend."
The cowboy smiled back, tipping his hat slightly. "You didn't need me to remind you," he said. "You already had the strength inside you. I just helped you see it. And you'll keep finding it every day." The girl felt tears in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy and gratitude. She realized that life would continue to have challenges, but she was ready to face them with courage, honesty, and hope. She had discovered the power of being seen, of trusting herself, and of accepting support from those who truly cared. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the girl felt a deep sense of belonging. She had arrived at the rodeo in tears, lost and scared, and she was leaving with confidence, courage, and a heart full of hope. The cowboy walked beside her, not as a savior, but as a guide and friend who had helped her discover the strength she already possessed. In that moment, the girl understood something profound. Life wasn't about pretending to be perfect or hiding one's emotions. Life was about trusting oneself, facing challenges with courage, and allowing kindness and understanding to guide the way. She had learned that even small gestures, gentle words, and patient support could transform a life in ways she had never imagined. And as they walked together across the fields, the girl felt a sense of freedom and possibility that she had never known before. She had faced her struggles, learned to trust herself, and discovered the power of connection and understanding. The world was still full of challenges, but she was ready, she was strong, she was seen. And she was finally truly herself.